Myra's knees ached against the cold stone as she scrubbed the servant's wing floor, the brush slipping in her grip from the soapy water. Whispers slithered from the shadowed alcoves like venom. Weak Omega, sold off like yesterday's scraps. Mother's payment for the pack's freedom, they say. Half-breed won't last a moon here. A low chuckle echoed from two maids polishing silver nearby, their eyes flicking to her bowed head. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, forcing her hands to move faster. Stay small, stay invisible. That's how you survived the sale, the exile, the endless drudgery. One wrong glance and they'd push harder. The heavy doors at the hall's end groaned open, sucking the air from the room. Footsteps measured, predatory, advanced, accompanied by the rustle of guards' armor and the hush of courtiers trailing like shadows. King Aurelius Nightfall himself, inspecting the household. Myra's pulse hammered. She kept her head down, brush scraping furiously. Don't look up. Don't breathe wrong. But then a small whimper cut through the tension. Prince Edrin, the mute half-vamp heir, fidgeting in his nursemaid's arms near the hearth. The boy twisted away from the woman's touch, his wide eyes darting, tiny fists clenched. The nursemaid fumbled, nearly dropping him, and whispers turned to gasps. Myra dropped her brush without thinking, lunging forward on instinct. Her hands, steady from years of mending wounds in the pack, caught the prince mid-slip, cradling him against her chest. He stilled instantly, his small body relaxing into her hold, silver-streaked hair brushing her chin as he buried his face in her shoulder. No flinch, no recoil, just quiet breath syncing with hers. Silence crashed down. Myra froze, the king's presence now a weight pressing from 10 paces away. She felt his gaze like a blade at her throat, dark, unblinking. Slowly, she lifted her eyes. Aurelius stood tall in black velvet edged with silver thorns, his face a mask of carved marble, crimson eyes locked on her. The court held its breath. No one touched the prince without leave. You, his voice rolled out, low and commanding, laced with something sharper than anger. The half-vampire Omega, Myra Vale. Her name on his lips sent ice through her veins. She nodded once, throat dry, still holding Edrin, who clung tighter. Release the menial tools, he said, gesturing dismissively at the bucket. From this moment you are reassigned, sole attendant to Prince Edrin's private care. No other duties. Murmurs erupted, shock, envy, derision, but Myra barely heard. Panic clawed up her chest, hot and familiar. Noticed. Chosen. Just like her mother had sold her, a transaction to save the rest. The shame burned, memories flooding, her mother's tear-streaked face shoving gold coins into traffickers' hands, whispering, "For your siblings, Myra." Stay alive. She'd been payment then, expendable. Was she payment now? Some court schemed to test the king's ward with fresh blood. Edrin whimpered softly, fingers twisting in her apron, grounding her. The boy needed her. His fragility mirrored her own hidden scars. Refuse, and she'd be cast out, her remaining family hunted by debts unpaid. Accept, and she'd buy their safety with her neck on the block. No choice. She straightened, meeting the king's gaze despite the tremor in her knees. As you command, my king. His eyes narrowed fractionally, a flicker crossing them, surprise, hunger, gone before she could name it. He turned on his heel, cape swirling, and the court parted like mist. Guards escorted her out, Edrin still in her arms, toward the royal wing. Hours blurred into tense relocation. A sparse chamber adjoining the prince's nursery, her few belongings dumped unceremoniously. Edrin refused to release her even as she tried to settle him into his silk-draped crib, his mute pleas vibrating through silent stares. She sang a half-forgotten pack lullaby under her breath, her golden wolf spirit stirring faintly in her core, secret, untapped, a warmth she dared not unleash here. A sharp knock shattered the quiet. Captain Lysa Thorne strode in, her guard's leathers scarred from old battles, short-cropped hair framing a face etched with suspicion. The woman's eyes swept Myra like a blade's search, lingering on Edrin's peaceful form. "Listen well, Omega," Lysa said, voice clipped as iron. Proximity to the king is safety wrapped in fangs. He noticed you means you're useful now or bait later. Learn the palace rules before they chew you up. Myra stood, careful not to jostle the sleeping prince. What rules? Lysa's lip curled. Eyes down unless spoken to. No opinions in council shadows. The court reeks of old blood laws, betrayals sealed in vein and oath. Kings ruthless for a reason, lost too much to softness. You get too close, you'll see the starvation in him, the kind that devours. She stepped closer, voice dropping. Edrin's your shield, but one slip whisper to the wrong ear, touch where forbidden and you're broken, or worse, collateral in his wars. My sibling learned that the hard way. Don't make me clean up your mess. Myra swallowed the knot of fear, her stubborn core hardening. I won't slip, the prince needs steady hands, not games. Lysa studied her, then nodded curtly. Prove it, training starts dawn. Survive that and maybe you'll last. She pivoted and left, door clicking shut like a trap springing. Alone again, Myra sank onto the bed's edge, Edrin's warmth a fragile anchor. Safety. Lysa's words echoed the whispers, Myra as weak link sold goods. But the king's gaze lingered in her mind, not cruel but piercing, as if he'd seen past her mask to the wolf coiled inside. She wouldn't bow, not fully, for Edrin, for the family her survival bought. Dawn bled crimson through arched windows when the summons came, not a guard but the king himself, striding into the nursery unannounced. Courtiers flanked the hall beyond, murmuring like distant thunder. Edrin stirred in his crib, sensing the shift, but Myra was already up, blocking the prince instinctively. Aurelius halted paces away, his presence filling the room like smoke, tall, unyielding, the air thickening with his scent of iron and night-blooming jasmine. The child responds to you, he stated, eyes flicking to Edrin then back. No question, just fact. Court whispers call you weak, I see otherwise. Her heart stuttered. Flattery, trap. He's frightened easily, my king, I know frightened. A muscle ticked in his jaw, the first crack in his control. Enough. Under Royal Clause 17, binding of sworn attendants, I name you Myra Vale, bound to Prince Edrin's care. You reside in the household proper, eat at our table, walk our halls, no leave without my seal. Gasps filtered from the doorway, courtiers craned necks. Bound. The word hit like chains, ancient blood law, unbreakable without death or royal pardon. Constant proximity, his chambers adjacent, his gaze unavoidable, his power a breath away. No escape, no smallness. Panic surged anew, shame twisting with it, sold again, this time by decree. But Edrin's hand reached through the crib bars, grasping hers. She squeezed back, chin lifting. Refusal meant exile, death for her kin. Acceptance meant threading the needle between fang and throat. Consent flickered in her mind, he offered choice in the nod she could give. But power loomed, one wrong step and tenderness curdled to domination. I accept the binding, she said, voice steady despite the storm inside. Aurelius's eyes darkened, holding hers too long, a lingering look that caught her breath, stirring something forbidden. Protective instinct flared in him, unbidden. The court saw only the feared king claiming a pawn. He turned away first, barking orders to the guards. Seal it in blood oath tonight. She begins immediately. As he swept out, courtiers swarming in his wake, Myra pulled Edrin close. Whispers reignited, the weak Omega chained to the throne's heart. She'll shatter. But in the prince's trusting gaze and the echo of the king's unspoken hunger, Myra felt the fracture lines shift. Safety wasn't simple. It never was. And neither was the pull toward the monster who might just crave her whole. Edrin's small body shuddered against Myra's chest, his silent cries ripping through the throne room like a blade. No sound escaped his throat, never did, but the raw panic in his wide eyes hit her harder than any scream. Courtiers hovered at the edges, their silk robes whispering judgments, waiting for the fragile prince to crack the fragile peace. Myra tightened her hold, instinct overriding fear. Stay small, survive. Her mother's voice echoed from years ago, the same voice that had bartered her away. But Edrin's terror clawed at something deeper. A flicker ignited behind her eyes, gold, wild, like sunlight piercing storm clouds. Her old wolf sight, dormant since the exile, stirred unbidden. Not a full shift, just an impression. A golden wolf's form, translucent and warm, curling protectively around them both. She breathed into it, willing the spirit to steady without letting it show. "SHH, little one," she murmured, her half-vampire pulse syncing with his frantic heartbeat. The air hummed faintly, unseen by the crowd, but Edrin's gasps evened. His tiny fists unclenched, eyes fluttering shut as the golden presence wrapped him like a hidden blanket. Peace settled, unnatural and swift. Across the room, Lady Vesper's gaze sharpened from the shadows. The courtier's fan stilled, her lips parting in calculation. Myra caught the flick of her wrist. A note slipped to a page boy, vanishing into the throng. Exposure. The wolf drace could mark her as threat or prize, either way chaining her tighter to the court's games. Hide it, Myra decided, steeling her spine. Teach yourself restraint or they'll carve it out. Footsteps echoed, heavy and deliberate. King Aurelius halted paces away, his crimson cloak pooling like spilled blood. He'd seen, his silver eyes locked on hers, unblinking hunger flickering beneath the iron mask. The court froze, breaths held. Punishment loomed. Omegas didn't wield miracles. "Captain Thorne," he said, voice low thunder. Lysa snapped to attention at his side, hand on her sword hilt. "Escort the prince and his attendant to the solar. No interruptions." Myra's arms ached as she rose, Edrin limp and trusting against her. The king's stare pinned her. "You." "Private lessons begin at midnight. Protocol, not parlor tricks. Usefulness spares the rod." Relief warred with defiance. He could have drained her on the spot, ancient blood laws be damned. Instead, this, thrusting her deeper into his web. She met his gaze, chin lifting a fraction. "I accept your majesty, but I keep my nights for the prince's vigil. He needs steady hands." A pause, breath catching. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Insolent. See that it serves." He turned, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist, but the weight of his curiosity lingered like a brand. Lysa marched them through shadowed corridors, her boots clipping stone. "Bold move, Omega. King's not known for mercy." Myra adjusted Edrin, the child's warmth grounding her. "Mercy's his chain. I won't break mine." The solar door thudded shut behind them. Moonlight sliced through arched windows, gilding the prince's cradle. Myra laid him down, then slipped a hand into her bodice. The tarnished locket emerged, wolf engraving dulled by years, a relic from her packed days. Mother's last gift before the sale. Shame burned her fingers, payment for survival. But tonight, strength. She pressed it to her palm, golden flicker responding like a pulse. Secrecy was her vigil. She'd train it alone, night by night, wolf hidden until she chose otherwise. Hours blurred. Edrin slept soundly, but Myra paced, testing the sight in stolen breaths. Gold wisped at her will, coiling tight, then vanishing. Restraint sharpened it, a blade, not a blaze. Dawn threatened when Lysa returned, face grim. Council stirs. Vesper's note claims witchcraft. King's holding them off for now. Myra nodded, locket vanishing back to skin. "Good, let them chase shadows." But the guard's eyes narrowed. "Shadows bite back. Extra watch on the prince by royal order, and on you." She leaned in, voice dropping. "He pulled me aside after, said protect the girl who quiets storms. Don't make me regret it." Myra's pulse spiked. The king intervening again. Not cruelty, but a tether. Aurelius's study reeked of old blood and sealed parchments, the fire's glow carving hollows in his face. He paced, the prince's calmed breathing replaying in his mind, a miracle from an expendable half-breed. Hunger gnawed not for veins, but the raw connection he'd starved for centuries. Massacre ghosts whispered, compassion killed your clan. Yet her restraint hooked him, stubborn gold in her eyes mirroring his own buried fractures. Lysa entered without knocking as bid. "Majesty." Council's filing motions on the Omega. Bloodlaw's demand testing her power. He halted, fangs pricking his lip. They'll wait. Useful, he'd called her. Truth cut deeper. She pierced his isolation without demanding oaths. Double the prince's watch, and hers, discreetly. If Vesper moves, end it. Lysa's jaw tightened, sibling's ghost in her eyes lost to similar plots. She's no pawn, sire, soft heart under that bite. Precisely. His voice roughened. Guard it, or the court devours us all. She saluted, retreating. Alone, Aurelius gripped the window ledge, city sprawl below pulsing with loyalties ready to snap. The Omega's secret steadied his ward, threatened the throne. But in her unbowed stare, he glimpsed what rule by domination had cost. Everything human. Tenderness clawed free, high-stakes gamble. Secrecy shielded her now, his shield forged in curiosity's fire. But courts thrived on threats. Hers could shatter them both. Back in the solar, Myra felt the shift before she heard the footfalls, extra guards outside, Lysa's shadow lingering. Edrin stirred, golden echo humming between them. Safety wasn't the king's order. It was this, wolf hidden, strength claimed. The locket warmed against her skin, shame twisting to steel. Whispers beyond the door grew, the Omega's light, treason or salvation. But she pulled Edrin closer. Let them plot. She'd survive by not bowing, not to them, not yet to him. The fracture lines deepened, pull intensifying. Monster's hunger met her stubborn flame, court closing in. Secrecy held for now. But threats brewed, golden power both shield and spark to the inferno. Myra's knees locked against the marble floor of the grand right chamber, the air thick with incense, and the metallic tang of spilled blood from the altar. Nobles lined the shadowed balconies, their eyes gleaming like polished obsidian, waiting for her to crawl forward as the blood law demanded. Parade as the king's newest token Omega, stripped to her shift, collar gleaming with fresh runes that bound her half-breed scent. Kneel and present, the High Chamberlain intoned, his voice a whip-crack echo, but Myra lifted her chin, her voice cutting through the hush like a blade. No. Gasps rippled outward, a wave crashing against the vaulted ceiling. King Aurelius' nightfall loomed on his obsidian throne at the chamber's heart, his crimson eyes narrowing from beneath a crown of thorned silver. The court froze, every breath held as Myra rose to her feet, her simple attendant's gown whispering against her legs. She wasn't built for this, sold like chattel by her own mother, orphaned and small in a world of fangs and oaths. But survival had taught her one truth: bowing broke you faster than defiance. I serve the household, she said steadily, meeting Aurelius's gaze without flinching, not as spectacle. The chamberlain sputtered, gesturing wildly at the ancient right scroll unrolled before him. The law requires submission. You are expendable half-blood. Enough! Aurelius's voice was ice over steel, low and final. He didn't rise, but power uncoiled from him like smoke, pressing the air heavier. Nobles shifted uneasily. No Omega had ever refused the parade, not in centuries of blood pacts sealing court alliances. Myra felt the weight of it all, their stares boring into her, probing for weakness. But she held her ground, heart pounding against her ribs. Her secret golden wolf stirred faintly beneath her skin, a warm pulse she clamped down hard. Not here, not now. Aurelius's fingers tightened on the throne's arms, knuckles whitening. Defiance in his hall was treason, yet this slip of a girl with her stubborn fire ignited something sharper than anger. He wanted to crush it, to remind her of the chasm between king and thrall. Approach, he commanded. She did, steps measured, stopping an arm's length from the throne's dais. Up close, his presence drowned her, tall, unyielding, the faint scent of aged wine and storm wind clinging to his black velvet robes. The court watched, breathless. You forget your place, he said, voice pitched for her ears alone, though every vampire ear in the chamber caught it. Tokens submit or they break. Her jaw set. I forget nothing, your majesty. I've calmed your wards, scrubbed your halls, that's service enough. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He could order the collar tightened, her fangs filed. her wolf scent dragged into the open for the courtiers to tear apart. But her eyes, stubborn hazel flecked with gold, held no fear, only that unyielding moral spine. It pricked him deeper than any blade. "Dismissed," he said curtly, turning his gaze to the chamberlain. "The rite concludes, all but the girl out." The nobles filed away in a rustle of silk and whispers, but Myra felt no relief. Aurelius's silence stretched, cold and deliberate, his eyes dissecting her every breath. Punishment wasn't always chains. Sometimes it was this, distance that starved the soul. "You test me," he finally said, rising to tower over her. "And I do not yield to tests. Speak your defiance again and you'll wish for the parade's humiliation." She swallowed, throat dry, but met his stare. "Humiliation isn't obedience. It's just cruelty." He leaned in fractionally, breath cool against her skin, a predator's pause that sent her pulse racing. "Cruelty keeps the court intact. Leave my sight." Myra backed away, bowing only once she reached the doors, her hands trembling now that the eyes were gone. Lysa Thorne waited in the shadowed antechamber, the captain's guard armor glinting under torchlight, her face a mask of controlled fury. "You fool," Lysa hissed, gripping Myra's arm and hauling her down a side corridor. "Defying him publicly, you've painted a target on your back." Myra yanked free, rubbing her arm. "They wanted me paraded like meat. I won't." A slithering voice interrupted from the alcove ahead. "Half-blood bitch hides more than submission. I smelled wolf on her during the ward's tantrum last moon, golden, unnatural." Lysa whirled, sword half-drawn, pinning the spying courtier Lord Vesper, a weasel-faced noble with ambitions higher than his station, against the wall. "Spying on the king's attendants. Treason whispers Vesper." Vesper sneered, fangs bared. "The blood laws forbid hidden beasts in the royal house. I'll tell the full court." "Enough." Aurelius materialized from the gloom like shadow given form, his presence slamming the air shut. Vesper paled, mouth clamping. Lysa stepped back, saluting crisply. "Your Majesty." "Silence him," Aurelius ordered Lysa, eyes never leaving Vesper. "Permanently if he speaks of this again. The girl's secrets are mine to judge." Vesper bowed low, scrambling away as Lysa sheathed her blade with a glare. Myra stood frozen, pulse thundering. Protected or marked? Aurelius turned to her, expression unreadable. "Do not mistake mercy for weakness." Then he was gone, striding toward the private halls. Lysa exhaled sharply. "That was intervention, not accident. Watch yourself, he's curious now." Myra nodded absently, but her gaze tracked the king's retreating form. He paused at the hall's end, shoulders subtly slumping as he pushed through a concealed door alone, the grand chambers emptying behind him. No attendants followed, no guards hovered. Just a man, king or monster, swallowed by shadows. Loneliness clung to him like a shroud, raw in that unguarded instant. She exhaled, decision crystallizing. Defiance had bought her nothing but eyes on her back. Trust might. Prince Edrin was the key, the mute half-vamp boy who flinched from most touches but leaned into her songs. Small kindnesses there could build walls against the court's storm. By dusk, Myra slipped into the nursery wing, the air warmer here, scented with herbs and milk. Edrin huddled in his oversized crib bed, silver hair tangled, eyes wide and haunted from the rite's echoes filtering through the vents. He didn't speak, couldn't, scarred by court cruelties blaming his mixed blood, but his small hand reached out as she approached. "Hey, little prince," she murmured, lifting him gently, his fragile body curling against her chest. "No flinch today." She hummed a low-pack lullaby her mother had sung before the sale, rocking him by the fire-lit window. His fingers twisted in her sleeve, tension easing. Trust, fragile as spun glass, took root. Aurelius watched from the hidden balcony above, unseen, his chest tight. The court's reaction to her defiance buzzed like hornets, nobles plotting, blood laws invoked in whispers. She was chaos incarnate, yet here she soothed his ward, the boy he'd sworn to shield after the rival clan's massacre. Guilt twisted deeper. He'd crushed that clan to protect the realm, but the isolation it bred gnawed him hollow. He descended the spiral stair, emerging into the nursery's glow. Myra startled, Edrin burrowing closer. "Your Majesty!" "Captain Thorne," he called without looking away. Lysa appeared at the door moments later, prompt as ever. "Sire, reassign the Omega. Domestic duties expand, full access to the prince's care, my private study for records, but confine her to the inner wing, no outer halls, no unescorted exits." Lysa raised a brow but nodded. "Containment with a leash. Wise." Myra's arms tightened around Edrin, reading the order's double edge, reward in closeness, cage in limits. Aurelius's eyes met hers, a flicker of something unspoken passing, curiosity edging past domination. "Prove your worth," he said softly, "for her alone, or this trust ends." He turned away, but the fracture pulled tighter. Her flame burned brighter in his shadowed world, and the court closed in, hungry for the break. Myra's blade clattered against the stone floor of the training yard, her breath ragged in the chill midnight air. Lysa's grip on her wrist tightened, not releasing as the captain forced her back against the shadowed wall. "You're holding back again," Lysa growled, eyes narrowing. "Spit it out, what's eating you?" Myra wrenched free, heart slamming. The yard's torches flickered low, casting long shadows over the empty ring where guards usually sparred. No one else lingered this late. The court slept under the weight of curfew. But Myra couldn't sleep, not with the king's fractured gaze burning in her mind from earlier that evening. She rubbed her wrist, the half-vampire veins there pulsing faintly gold beneath her skin. "It's my mother," she whispered, the words clawing out before she could swallow them. "She sold me. Exact terms. One Omega daughter for safe passage across the border packs. No coin, no land, just me, to settle her debts to slavers. I've carried that shame like a brand. Stay small, stay useful, or I'm discarded again." Lysa's face hardened, her sword arm dropping. The captain sheathed her blade with a rasp, stepping closer until their breaths mingled. "Blood laws bind that tighter than iron. If the council knew." "They won't." Myra's voice cracked, stubborn fire rising. "Swear it." Lysa hesitated, glancing at the arched gateway where patrols might pass. Her own scar, jagged across her jaw from a sibling's betrayal, twitched. "Secrecy, yes, but consequence follows truth like fangs. The king's court chews up secrets. You'll pay for this weight eventually." She clapped Myra's shoulder, firm but not unkind. "Train harder tomorrow. Weakness invites teeth." Myra nodded, shame twisting sharper than any blade. Lysa vanished into the shadows, leaving her alone with the dying torches. Across the keep, in the royal nursery's vaulted chamber, Edrin's nightmare shattered the silence. The boy thrashed on his silk-draped bed, mute cries tearing from his throat, raw, animal sounds that clawed at Aurelius's control. The king knelt beside him, one hand hovering, afraid to touch. The child's half-vampire eyes, wide with terror, locked on his guardian's face. Sweat beaded on Edrin's brow, his small fists clutched the sheets stained with old blood from council tests. Aurelius's hunger surged, fangs aching at the scent of fiersweat. He forced it down, voice low and steady. "Enough!" The words snapped like a whip, but Edrin only whimpered louder, curling into a ball. Provoked beyond endurance, Aurelius gripped the bedpost until wood splintered. "I did this to you," he said flatly, no drama in the admission. 20 years passed. I ordered the slaughter of Clan Vesper, rivals threatening the blood oath borders. Innocents died in the flames, children like you. Their ghosts whisper I'll slip again. Affection. It loosens the chains. Hunger takes over. I touch you softer, and next it's the vein, the kill. I rule to prevent that beast. Edrin stilled, staring up with fractured trust. The door creaked, Myra, slipping in unbidden, her shift disheveled from the yard. She'd heard the cries echoing down the halls, drawn like a moth despite the risk. She froze in the threshold, golden wolf spirit stirring faintly in her blood, urging silence. But Aurelius's words hung raw in the air. his broad shoulders slumped under invisible chains. Cruelty as armor, she saw it now, not malice but a starvation deeper than bloodlust. Loneliness carved him hollow, just as her mother's bargain had marked her. She stepped forward, voice steady. Practical help, then. No pity. I know routines that calm him. Warm cloths scented with lavender from the southern groves, rhythmic humming from old pack lays. Let me show you for his nights. Aurelius's crimson eyes snapped to her, assessing. The power between them crackled. He could end her with a glance, dismiss her as presumptuous chattel. Yet he rose slowly, towering but unmoving. Why risk it? Because he needs steady hands, Myra said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Not tests, not isolation. A beat of silence, Edrin's breathing the only sound. Aurelius nodded once, terse. A pact. You teach him these rituals daily under my watch. In return, I forbid the council's brutal probes. No more silver needles or isolation cells. And his voice dropped, a concession. Protective privileges. Lysa shadows you openly. No one touches what's under my oath. Myra's pulse raced, agency, not chains. She knelt by Edrin, murmuring assent. Agreed. The boy uncurled slightly, fingers twitching toward her. Inside Myra, the golden wolf stirred restlessly, its power a secret blaze she'd hidden since childhood. Not yet, she willed it. But as she hummed the first low notes of a pack lay, soft vibrations rumbling from her chest, the spirit pushed. One small act, public, undeniable. A warm golden glow pulsed from her palm as she touched Edrin's brow. The wolf's nudge rippled through him, gentle as a dream weaver. Edrin gasped. Safe, he whispered, the word cracking the air like dawn on stone. His first in months. Aurelius inhaled sharply, fangs glinting but restrained. The vulnerability hit him, a child's voice, her glow, cracking his iron rule. Trust flickered, dangerous as exposed throat. He lowered a boundary, his hand brushed Edrin's hair, lingering without hunger's pull. Then impossibly he nodded to Myra. Stay tonight, she exhaled, the wolf retreating to embers. Her own wall thinned, she met his eyes not in fear but alliance. The court loomed beyond the nursery door, politics and blood laws circling like wolves. But here in the dim glow, two confessions bound them. Her shame laid bare, his guilt stripped raw. Fragile trust sparked, a flame the shadows couldn't yet quench. Edrin sighed into sleep, clutching Myra's sleeve. Aurelius watched from the chair's edge, the fracture in his control widening, not to ruin but possibility. Lysa's warning echoed in her mind, consequence waits, but for now the pact held. The king's gaze lingered on her, heavy with unspoken hunger, not for blood but the connection he'd starved for centuries. She didn't pull away. Dawn crept through the arrow slits, gray light staining the stone. Myra rose to fetch the lavender cloths, her step sure despite the imbalance. He could claim her life, her will, but tonight she'd chosen to stay. And in that choice the court's hunger felt a fraction less absolute. Lord Vesper rose from the shadowed ranks of the great hall, his voice slicing through the murmur like a blade through silk. By the ancient blood laws of the first night, Your Majesty, we petition to bind all omegas within the court's walls. Their scents provoke unrest, their blood invites chaos. Exile or collar them, lest they fracture our unity. Aurelius's grip tightened on the throne's arms, the carved ravens biting into his palms. The hall's torchlight flickered across a sea of noble faces, some avid, others feigning neutrality, all eyes darting to Myra where she stood rigid at the chamber's edge. Her half-blood sent a faint provocation amid the incense. Vesper's faction had timed this perfectly, post-dawn when exhaustion masked fangs. Their real target her, the orphan attendant who dared tend his ward without bowing lower. To let it pass unchallenged would doom not just her, but every fragile half-blood under his roof. He rose, voice a low thunder that silenced the hall. Denied, but I invoke royal exception under Clause 7, a blood bond for the Omega Myra Veil. She falls under my direct aegis. Her autonomy yields to my command in public sight. Gasps rippled outward. Myra's pulse hammered in his senses, sharp and wild from across the room. Captain Lysa Thorne shifted at her post near the doors, hand on her sword hilt, eyes flicking between them. Aurelius extended his hand, the ritual dagger already in his grasp, obsidian-edged, etched with binding runes. Approach, Myra Vale, sign in blood or face the law's full weight. She crossed the hall in measured steps, chin lifted despite the tremor he alone could scent. Up close, her eyes burned with that stubborn fire, green-flecked gold under the strain. The immediate threat loomed. Vesper's guards already petitioning for her seizure, blood law scrolls unrolled on the dais steps. Refusal meant chains for her tonight, exposure for Edrin's vulnerabilities tomorrow. She met his gaze, breath catching once, a silent accusation, then pricked her thumb on the dagger's tip. Her blood welled, dark and potent with her hybrid spark, and she pressed it to the parchment beside his own crimson mark. The bond sealed with a faint hiss of magic, runes glowing then fading. Publicly she was his now. No noble could touch her without his leave, but nor could she act without his shadow over her. The hall erupted. Cheers from the loyalists, Thorne's guards thumping fists to chests, clashed with snarls from Vesper's allies. Tyranny, Lady Aloan spat from the front ranks, her jewels glinting like venom. The king chains the innocent to hoard his pet. Vesper himself leaned to whisper in advisor Kale's ear, the prominent schemer's lips curling into a predator's smile. Aurelius felt the fracture lines spiderwebbing. Kale's whisper campaign would spread like rot, painting him not as protector but as a hunger-blinded despot favoring a half-breed over tradition. He dismissed the assembly with a gesture, the doors slamming shut behind the exodus of silk and spite. But the damage lingered in the air, thick as smoke. Myra fled the hall's weight, pulse still thundering, corridors blurring past torch sconces. Panic clawed up her throat, not just the bond's invisible leash, but the eyes that now branded her his property. Edrin's chambers offered the only refuge, the mute prince her anchor amid the storm. She slipped inside, bolting the door, and knelt by his bed where he huddled under furs, wide eyes tracking her every breath. "SHH, little one," she murmured, drawing him into her arms. His small frame trembled against her, fingers twisting in her sleeve, a silent demand for truth. The golden wolf stirred within her then, latent spirit uncoiling at her desperation, its warm glow manifesting as a faint shimmer in her palm. She cupped Edrin's cheek, letting the wolf's essence brush him like sunlight through storm clouds. It calmed him always, this secret she'd guarded fiercer than her own skin. But what to say? The court buzzed with rebellion. One whisper of her witchlight, Wolf and Vesper's faction would crucify them both as abominations. She swallowed the lie before it choked her. The king, he made a promise to keep us safe, like a big brother swearing to his kin, "No one's taking you away." Edrin's gaze sharpened, mute but piercing. He sensed the fracture in her words, the compromise souring her tongue. She'd lied to her only friend here, the child who trusted her wholeness, all to smother scandal before it devoured them. Shame burned hotter than the bond's pull, but the threat was now. Guards already patrolled the halls for Omega insurgents. Integrity cracked, but Edrin breathed easier, curling closer. She'd pay the fracture later. Aurelius paced his private solar as dusk bled through the casements, the blood bonds hum a constant tether in his veins. Myra's heartbeat sinking faintly with his own, a vulnerability he'd never allowed before. The deputation knocked unbidden, Vesper at the fore, flanked by Kale and 3 stone-faced elders clutching blood-law tomes. "Majesty," Vesper intoned, eyes gleaming, "the bond mocks our laws. Those of her blood, Omegas, half-vamps, stir sedition. Exile them all or the court's loyalty frays." Aurelius turned, letting silence stretch until it cracked their resolve. Myra's panic flickered through the bond, distant but sharp. She hid it well, but he felt the cost. These fools threatened not just her but the fragile peace he'd clawed from massacre's ashes. His own guilt echoed. The rival clan's screams still haunted his nights, a tyrant's shadow he refused to become. "The laws bend to royal will," he said flatly. "Invoke them against her and you invoke them against my reign. Her blood stays. Push further and yours spills." Cale's whisper campaign had already chipped his flanks, loyalists wavering, whispers of "softened king" slithering through the guard rotations. Vesper paled but pressed. "The realm demands purity, sire. Your attachment endangers." Aurelius's hand shot out, seizing Vesper's throat in a blur, fangs bared an inch from flesh. Not piercing, no innocence broken, but the threat landed like iron. "My attachment is the realm's shield. Silence your tongues or I'll silence them permanently." He released, watching them scramble back, tomes clutched like shields. The door thudded shut behind them. Alone, he sank into his chair, the bond pulsing with Myra's hidden turmoil. Reputation tarnished, allies questioning, cost piled on cost. Yet her choice to sign, Edrin's safety secured. It cracked his isolation, a dangerous warmth amid the court's simmering rebellion. Mercy had bound them, but at what price to his throne? The noble's voice sliced through the throne room's hush like a blade. "This half-breed witch has ensnared our king with forbidden spells. Her golden aura taints the prince. Look how the boy clings to her shadow." Myra stood frozen at the ceremony's edge, Edrin's small hand clutched in hers, the child's mute terror vibrating through her palm. Whispers had swirled for days, advisor Voron's poison, painting her as a sorceress poisoning the royal bloodline. But this, in the full court gaze under crystal chandelier's dripping shadow, was the strike. Her pulse hammered, the latent golden wolf essence coiling tight in her chest, begging release. She wouldn't. Not here. Not with every eye on her vulnerability. King Aurelius loomed on the dais, black robes pooling like spilled ink, his face a mask of glacial control. The bond between them tugged sharp, Myra's fear spiking into his awareness, but he didn't move, didn't roar denial. The silence stretched, breath-catching, as courtiers leaned forward, Voron smirking from the front ranks. "Speak your evidence, Lord Cale," Aurelius said at last, voice low thunder, eyes locked on the accuser. No defense for her, no claim of her innocence. Cale thrust forward a vial of shimmering residue. "Stolen from her quarters, wolf magic residue, your majesty." "She's no mere omega, she's a curse." Myra's throat burned. Edrin whimpered silently, burrowing into her skirts. She met Aurelius's gaze across the room, pleading not with words but the raw hurt in her stance. "See me, protect us." Yet he remained statue, still, calculating. "Captain Thorn," the king commanded, not breaking stare. "Escort the attendant Myra Vale to secure quarters under guard. Full restraint protocol until investigation clears her." Lysa Thorn materialized at Myra's side, grip firm on her arm, face etched with grim apology. The court erupted in murmurs, victory for Voron's faction. As Myra was marched out, Edrin pride wailing from her hold. The child's silent screams clawed her heart worse than any chain. The king's procedural chill hit like her mother's betrayal, sold for scraps, abandoned to survive alone. No warmth, no claim, just cold order. She wouldn't break for him. Night cloaked the palace gardens as Myra slipped her guards. Lysa's watch was iron, but Myra knew the shadows. Half-vampire senses threading through ivy-choked walls. The golden wolf essence surging now. A warm glow she siphoned into a hidden crystal pendant at her throat. It masked her fully, scent and bond alike, as she scaled the outer wall, thorns ripping her attendant's gown. Autonomy. She'd reclaim it in the wilds, far from courts that devoured the small. The ruined lodge crouched in the mist-shrouded woods 10 miles out, its timbers silvered by moonfall, a forgotten hunter's hold from pre-blood wars. Myra barred the door, breath ragged, and sank against it. The bond pulsed faint now, muffled by the essence, his worry flickering like distant lightning. But she'd signed his mercy pact for Edrin's sake, not his throne. No more payment. She'd hunt, hide, mother no one's wards. Her hands shook as she kindled a fire, the wolf spirit's gold flickering in her veins. Free, finally. In the palace depths, Aurelius paced his private solar, the ceremony's echo gnawing. Her hurt throbbed through the bond before it dimmed, fled. No, impossible under Lysa. But the chill in his command replayed. Escort, not embrace. He'd frozen, throne's weight chaining him. Public defense would fuel rebellion. Voron's whispers already cracking alliances. Yet in shielding the realm, he'd echoed her wound. The bond had shown flashes. A mother's cold trade Myra bartered like coin. His procedural blade had cut the same. Rage boiled. Voron. The advisor's campaign wasn't loyalty, it was bid for power, using Myra as wedge. Aurelius summoned the man with a single blood call, the chamber doors slamming shut. Voron entered smirking, bowing low. Majesty, the witch, the king's hand cracked across his face, fangs bared. You poisoned my court against an innocent. Voron staggered, blood welling. For the realm's purity, Aurelius seized his throat, slamming him against marble. She calms Edrin. She signed the pact. Your lies fracture what holds this court. Fangs sank in, not to feed but rip. Voron gurgled, thrashing as the king tore oaths from his veins, exsanguinating the betrayal in sprays of crimson. No trial, no mercy, just purge. He dropped the husk, chest heaving, moral line splintering. He'd sworn no tyranny, no innocent blood, but Voron had struck at his hidden ache, the warmth Myra and Edrin cracked open. Now his hands dripped guilt, thrones cost mounting. Edrin's cry pierced the hall, silent no more in distress, a raw keen through the bond link the boy shared with his guardian. Aurelius blurred to the nursery, finding the child curled fetal on the bed, face streaked, tiny fists pounding silk. The mute heir's world had shattered without Myra's touch. Edrin, Aurelius gathered him, the boy's shudders racking them both. Remorse flooded, sharp as venom. His failure had orphaned the child again, echoing the massacre that haunted him, rival clans slaughtered under his blade for greater good. Cold logic then, cold now, no more. Captain Thorn, Lysa burst in at his roar. Find Myra Vale, whatever it takes. And prepare the blood-right chamber. Lysa saluted, eyes widening at the gore on his cuffs. Sire, Voron's death will be announced as heart failure. Go. Alone with Edrin's slowing sobs, Aurelius whispered to the bond, faint now. Return, Myra. I'll break it, the pact, the tie. At cost to my rule. No more chains. Word of Voron's sudden passing, ignited backlash by dawn. Myra watched from the lodge's loft, wolf-enhanced sight piercing the tree line as Lysa's patrol scoured the woods below. Deeper in, court riders galloped, nobles rallying, whispers of tyranny turning to shouts. The king slays his own counsel. Blood laws broken, she crouched, pendant warm against her skin, heart torn. Aurelius had purged for her, violent, ashamed reaction fitting a ruler fracturing. Edrin's face haunted her, the boys need her anchor. But the ceremony's chill lingered. He'd failed warmth when she needed it most, procedural king over protector. Return to that. Trust a man whose tenderness cracked his throne, costing them all. The bond flickered his remorse raw plea. Lysa's voice barked below. Tracks here fresh. Myra gripped the crystal, golden essence pulsing. Stay small, survive, or claim the warmth he'd bartered his rule for. The riders neared, backlash horns blaring. Choice now or chains forever. Myra crushed the crystal's glow against her palm, the golden wolf's warmth surging through her veins like liquid fire. Horns shattered the court's fragile hush, riders thundering into the grand hall behind her, their banners snapping accusations of tyranny. She shoved through the throne room doors, heart slamming, Edrin clutched to her side. The mute prince's small hand trembling in hers as noble voices rose like vipers. King Aurelius, Lord Voron bellowed from the forefront, his entourage fanning out in crimson cloaks, swords half drawn. Your secret dealings with this half-breed Omega mock the blood laws. We demand trial by ordeal, expose her as property or yield regency to the High Council. The realm bleeds under your whims. The hall erupted, courtiers hissing, guards shifting uneasily. Myra felt eyes pierce her like stakes. Myra Vale, the expendable attendant sold for scraps, now the spark for rebellion. Edrin whimpered, burying his face in her skirts, his fragile body shaking from the noise. She knelt swiftly, cupping his chin, and whispered the forbidden call. Golden essence bloomed from her skin, a soft aura wrapping him like sunlight through storm clouds. His wide eyes steadied, breaths evening as the wolf's spirit hummed between them, unseen by most but felt in the sudden quiet rippling outward. "I am no property," Myra declared, rising with Edrin's hand firm in hers. Her voice cut the din, stubborn fire overriding the shame that had chained her for years. "Sold once by blood, but not again. I speak for myself, and for the prince who suffers your cruelties." Gasps rippled. Captain Lysa Thorne, stationed at the throne dais, gripped her sword hilt tighter, her gaze flicking between Myra and the king. Aurelius loomed on the obsidian throne, his pale features carved from ice, black eyes devouring the chaos. The noble's challenge clawed at him, doubled down, crushed them with the old laws that had kept his throne bloodied but secure, or shatter the secrecy that armored his rule. Hunger gnawed deeper than thirst. This woman, this stubborn light, had cracked his isolation, bartered with warmth he'd never known. Edrin's calm gaze on her now mirrored his own buried ache. He rose, voice a thunderclap that silenced the hall. "Enough!" Aurelius descended the dais steps, cloak billowing like shadowed wings. Every eye locked on him, the feared king whose massacres haunted whispers. "The blood bond clause is annulled. Henceforth, Omegas and wards are under royal protection. No sale, no claim without consent. Proclamation sealed in my blood this night." He sliced his palm with a fang, crimson dripping onto the throne's ledger stone, the ancient law fracturing visibly as runes flickered and died. Murmurs exploded. He'd sacrificed the veil of absolute authority, nobles now able to challenge him openly without fear of summary execution. Varin sneered. "You weaken us all for a whore's favor." Aurelius's gaze pinned him, lethal calm masking the terror of vulnerability. "Speak against the innocent again and test the new law yourself." Lysa stepped forward, her blade whispering free, herding the lord back with pragmatic force. Myra's pulse roared. "Stay small, bow, survive as always." But Edrin's fingers tightened on hers, the golden echo still thrumming, and Aurelius's eyes met hers, not as ruler to chattel, but man starved for the connection he just risked everything for. She stepped forward, chin high, refusing the old pattern. "Terms, then. Legal protections for all like me. My autonomy, no bonds, no orders beyond stewardship. Shared care of Edrin with voice in his rights. Silence me again and I walk with him." The court held its breath. Aurelius paused, breath catching at her defiance, the power imbalance raw between them. Her stubborn morality, her refusal to break, pulled at the guilt of his past slaughters. He nodded once, sharp. "Accepted. Witnesses bind it." Lysa slammed her gauntlet on the ledger, sealing the pact as courtiers scrambled, whispers turning to frantic recalculations, alliances shifting, ledgers rewritten overnight. In the aftermath, chaos bent to order under Lysa's iron enforcement. She dragged two scheming nobles to the cells for plotting against wards, her voice barking. "New law means new consequences. Adapt or rot." Courtiers bowed deeper now, not from fear alone but wary respect for the shift. Edrin tugged Myra toward the king's side, his mute plea clear. "Stay." For the first time, he reached for Aurelius without flinching, tiny hand brushing the king's sleeve. Aurelius froze, then knelt slowly, enveloping the boy in a rare, tentative hold, tenderness cracking his ruthless facade. Myra watched, chest tight, as Aurelius altered the evening ritual. No longer domination's feast. He dismissed the blood thralls early, drawing only Edrin and her to the private solar. "Speak freely here," he murmured, voice rough with unpracticed softness. "The court sees the change. Now we build it." Edrin nestled between them on the velvet cushions, golden wisps fading but his calm enduring. Myra met Aurelius's gaze, the lingering look heavy with slow-burn promise, protective instincts flaring in him, her own stubborn heart yielding not to power but choice. Lysa lingered at the door, her scarred face softening fractionally. "You've bought a reckoning, sire. Hope it's worth the blade at your throat." She saluted Myra crisp, the intermediary's loyalty bridging them. Outside, horns faded to uneasy silence, but inside, the found family's tentative roots took hold. Hard-won, fragile, born from a king's law changed, and a woman's voice claimed. Aurelius's hand brushed Myra's, a pause electric with what might heal the loneliness in them both, if the court didn't tear it down first.